LI News Radio presents Meet the Candidates with Matt Goldapper.
.1039 LI News Radio. I'm Matt Goldapper, and with me, running for New York State Assembly, Anthony Palumbo. How are you?
I'm very well, Matt. Thank you for having me.
So this is your first time running for office, correct?
That is correct.
All right. Tell me a little bit about yourself and what makes you think you're qualified for this position.
Certainly. I'm an attorney. I live out in New Suffolk. I was born and raised in Brookhaven in Patchogue, and I was there for about 30 years of my life. In the past 13, I've been out on the East End in the town of Southold. And I was an assistant district attorney in this county for about 6 years and went into private practice. I have a small business in Mattituck, a small law firm that I've been doing for 9 years or so. And I'm married. I am a father of 2 beautiful children. And as a small business owner, resident of the district, someone who deals with the day-to-day workings of constituents, I certainly would suggest that I'm qualified for this job. I feel the pain of the taxes and being a homeowner on the East End.
Great. So the two of you, you and your opponent, basically there's no incumbent. You had Dan Squadro, who moved to a different position that you're filling in. So both of you don't have a track record. What do you particularly think will make you the better candidate? What are some of your visions for the area?
Well, I made a conscious choice when I got out of law school to enter public service. And it was as satisfying a job as I think you can have. I worked for the district attorney's office, moved through the ranks quickly. I worked on the East End for a short time, then I was in a felony screening bureau, I was in a narcotics bureau, and then the major crime bureau, which deals with major violent felonies, rapes, robberies, some homicides, and prosecuted those individuals for a few years. And then my last year and a half, 2 years, I was promoted to the trial supervisor for the 5 eastern towns. The North Fork, the South Fork, and Shelter Island is its own bureau. Even though it's a county-wide agency, they have their own bureau, and there was a bureau chief, and I was the number 2 person overseeing all of the prosecutions and the line assistants out there. So I certainly understand that there is maybe no particular record in politics. I certainly have a record in public service that speaks for itself. Right. Unfortunately, I had to leave. It was a great position and, again, a very satisfying job. But new wife, new baby, new house, and I had to make the move and go into private practice and try and make a little bit more money in order to survive on the East End. Gotcha.
So Albany is plagued with scandal and corruption. It's no big secret. And as a former assistant DA, what are some of your plans to clean up Albany?
Well, initially I've proposed that elected officials forfeit their pension when they're convicted of a felony. There is some legislation pending. That's something I would certainly support. That's really the reason why I got off the couch and got into this. My practice is doing well. My wife's an attorney as well. And I just felt that the complacency has gotten us here. So I needed to make a move. I needed to do something. And when Dan Squadro was actually elected out of the seat and it was vacant, I discussed it at long length with my wife because it involves a job in Albany. And she said, go for it. And that's something that they've indicted or charged 22 of them in the past 7 years up there. And it's broken. It's just broken. People shake their heads and almost laugh when you discuss politics. We are an absolute embarrassment to this nation as a state. We are the least business-friendly state, to bring it back home to what I think I can do. We are the least business-friendly state in the nation for the 2nd year in a row.
Great. And so for some people out there that don't even know what the New York State Assembly does, can you go over what that job is in particular? So some people don't even know, no idea.
Certainly. Well, the New York State Assembly is, I would say, the congressional side of state politics. We have a Senate and an Assembly. There are 150 assemblymen and assemblywomen throughout the state who represent each individual district, but ultimately we collectively make law, and if it passes the other house, the Senate, it would go to the governor for signature and ultimately become the law of the land.
Great. And specifically, what is the district that you would be covering?
The 2nd Assembly District. It's geographically quite a large district. It goes from Mount Sinai Harbor down to Sunrise Highway and all the way out to Orient Point. So it's quite the large district. It's based upon the enrollment is essentially how they divide them up. So they're on every street corner in the 5 boroughs, but this one is particularly large in light of the fact that we're out in farm country on the North Fork.
Great. And you've been endorsed by a bunch of unions and political officials. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. The law enforcement community in Suffolk County, and I should say the police organizations, and court officers and corrections and deputy sheriffs have endorsed me. I've worked closely with a lot of them as an assistant DA and in private practice, representing some of them individually for different matters and so forth. So they, I hold the most important aspects, and I believe the most important aspects, as corny as it may sound, of a civilized society are public safety and education of our kids. I mean, I've got kids. They're 9 and 6. They're in 4th and 1st grade. So, of course, this is a real big issue. And that's something that I'm honored to have their backing. And I think that New York spends and spends and spends on many things, yet we don't spend enough, particularly on education, when it comes to that. We don't get our share of state aid. The STAR exemption, which is the state tax relief exemption, is
so are these things that you'll be fighting for? You'll be fighting for more state aid and more financial backing?
Certainly, without a doubt. And as I mentioned earlier, you have the assembly districts are comprised of a per capita enrollment, so you have significant amounts of assemblymen and assemblywomen from the 5 boroughs in New York City. And that's a predominantly, overwhelmingly a Democratic group. So you have the Democrats in the Assembly who have an obvious anti-Long Island agenda. It's without a doubt. We get 2/3 of the state aid we're entitled to. They've openly said we represent tenants. We don't represent landlords or owners. So as a property owner, that's offensive to me, and that's why I feel that I certainly need to get up there and I need to go and fight for us, those of us that own homes, so that we don't do what most people are doing in the district, which is they wait until their children are out of college or high school and they live in a beautiful community on the East End. They can get a lot of money for their house. They sell their home and move to North Carolina.
All right, so what separates you from your opponent? You're both attorneys. None of you have political experience. What separates the two of you?
Well, I would suggest that there is no political experience in my background, but I consciously made a choice to enter public service when I got out of law school. I interviewed only in district attorney's offices, and I interviewed in the Manhattan DA's office, where I worked for about 14 months, and the Brooklyn district attorney's office, as well as Suffolk, but I chose to come home. This is where I'm from. This is where I wanted to make a life for myself and a potential family. And I wasn't married at the time. I had just been dating my wife. I met her in law school. And once I received the confirmation from Suffolk County and the job offer, I declined the other 2 and I came home. So that is something that is certainly, I think, should be considered, that I was in public service and represented the constituents. And as far as a separation between myself and my opponent, I have 6 years representing victims and representing constituents as a prosecutor, and another 9 years representing individuals, small businesses, and people on the East End, and people on the North Fork who are plumbers and electricians and local folk dealing with local issues, some of them in terrible crisis, some of them not. But that, coupled with the fact that I am a small business owner, I am a homeowner, and I do have children in school, that I can certainly focus on the aspects of taxes. And taxes have everything to do with living out east. When we have property taxes, we have high school taxes, and we have certain things like the tax cap, the 2% tax cap on education. Although it's a good start, it's a good idea, we are not receiving our appropriate state aid. And then we have the unfunded mandates, as I've discussed at length before, that the unfunded mandates that aren't paid for by the state aid, out of the state kitty, ultimately the bill is footed by those of us that own property. That we have mandated law that requires us to pay for certain programs or to do certain things under the educational system, such as the implementation of Common Core and all of the necessary teacher evaluations and so forth that are required. And we need to make sure that we are able to get that, because that is something, again, that's an anti-Long Island agenda where, yes, we can limit the school tax, which is a great idea as a whole, but then we need to fill the gaps. We ultimately have we have an excellent school system on Long Island, yet we can't neglect it financially, so we need to have we need to have state aid. And we need to have supplement as best we can, certainly as we can possibly on a local level, let the school boards adjust their finances accordingly and deal with the mandates and the required programs that the governor has imposed.
Great. And when people are going out to vote on Election Day, where do they find you on the ballot?
I'm the Republican candidate and the conservative candidate.
There you go. Anthony Palumbo running for State Assembly. This is 103.9 LI News Radio.